The gravel crunched under the tires of my battered sedan, a sound far too loud in the profound quiet of the late afternoon. Blackwood Manor. The name itself felt like a sigh whispered on a chill wind, and as I finally cleared the last curve of the overgrown driveway, I understood why. It wasn't just a house. It was a monument to forgetting, a hulking, shadowed silhouette against the bruised, gray sky of the Pacific Northwest. My great-aunt Elara, God rest her reclusive soul, had chosen her final resting place well. Or rather, she'd chosen her final living place. Or what remained of them. Even from this distance, I could see the rampant overgrowth, a verdant, grasping tapestry of leaves and vines that threatened to reclaim the very walls of the house. Trees, ancient and gnarled, pressed close, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching for the manor's ornate gables. I cut the engine, and the sudden silence was absolute, a heavy blanket descending. This was it. My fresh start. My escape from everything. The air thick with the scent of damp earth, pine needles, and something else, something faintly sweet and cloying, like overripe fruit or decaying flowers, filled my lungs. I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. A fresh start. Right. Pushing open the car door, the hinges groaned in protest, echoing in the vast stillness. I pulled my jacket tighter, my gaze sweeping across the facade. Broken panes in some of the upper windows stared out like vacant eyes. A gargoyle, half obscured by ivy, leered from a corner of the roofline, its stone face eroded by decades of rain. He'd warned me it was a bit of a fixer-upper, a colossal understatement that now seemed almost comical. This wasn't a fixer-upper, it was a sleeping giant, slowly being devoured by the very earth it stood upon. I walked towards the front door, my boots sinking slightly into the damp, moss-covered flagstones. The porch creaked under my weight, the wood soft in places. Cobwebs, thick and laden with dew, brushed against my face, and I instinctively recoiled, wiping them away. I turned the handle, steeling myself, and pushed. The door groaned, a long, drawn-out shriek of protest from rusted hinges that seemed to resonate deep within the house itself. A plume of dust, decades old, billowed out, carrying with it the distinct aroma of decay, aged paper, and something else. Inside, the light was minimal, filtering through grimy windows and the gaps in drawn, heavy drapes. Dust motes danced in the sparse beams of light, swirling in the stagnant air. The silence was even more profound in here, a thick, suffocating presence that pressed in on my eardrums. I stepped inside, letting the heavy door fall shut behind me with a soft thud that swallowed any lingering echoes. Alone. Truly alone. My first footsteps on the polished, albeit dust-coated wooden floorboards felt sacrilegious, disturbing the long-held peace. I ran a hand along a nearby console table, leaving a clean swipe in the thick layer of gray. A large, ornate mirror above it reflected my tired, anxious face, framed by the ghostly shapes of the entryway. I started to explore, moving slowly, deliberately, my senses on a high alert. Each room I entered was a tableau of forgotten lives, frozen in time. The dining room, its long table draped in white sheets, held the phantom echoes of long-dead conversations. Everything was covered, preserved in a sepulchral hush, yet beneath the dust and the decay, I felt a strange pulse, a subtle vibration that seemed to emanate from the very fabric of the house. In what must have been Elara's study, the air was particularly heavy with that earthy, sweet scent. Shelves crammed with ancient, leather-bound books lined the walls, many of them on botany, their titles indecipherable in the dim light. A large, sturdy desk sat in the center, covered in a thick layer of dust. But beneath it, I spotted something unusual. I knelt, peering closer. A small wooden box, half hidden, its lid slightly ajar. I pulled it out, my fingers brushing against the cool, smooth wood. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a collection of dried plant specimens. But these weren't ordinary pressed flowers. One in particular caught my eye. A delicate, almost skeletal bloom, its petals like brittle, curled parchment, radiating from a central, knot-like core. Elara had been eccentric, I knew that. But these weren't just rare plants. They felt wrong. Alien. As I carefully closed the box, the house seemed to sigh around me. A low, drawn-out sound that could have been the wind, or the ancient timbers settling, or something else entirely. Something breathing. It felt like it was waiting. And I, Blake, had just walked right in. Blackwood Manor. It wasn't just old. It was a hulking skeletal presence draped in shadow even in the fading light. It reminded me, in a strange, unsettling way, of stories I'd heard about a prison chapel after lights out, where every breath, every creak of the old wooden pews would echo like a gunshot. This was worse. Here there were no pews, only the vast, empty expanse of an ancient house and the weight of the years it had held. I grabbed my duffel bag and a box of essentials, the car door groaning a protest as I pushed it open. Inside, the manor was a cavern of dust motes dancing in the last slivers of sunlight that pierced the grimy windows. I walked through the echoing foyer, my footsteps swallowed by the vastness. It was a place designed for grand living, now repurposed by neglect into a tomb of forgotten things. My first task was to find a light switch that actually worked. After fumbling in the gloom, I managed to coax a single dim bulb to life in what I assumed was the main living area. I dropped my bags, took a deep breath, and tried to tell myself this was just an old house. A very, very old house. It wasn't just the expected groans of settling timber or the sigh of wind through ill-fitting panes. These were different. A faint, almost imperceptible shush seemed to drift from the walls themselves, a sound like dry leaves skittering across a distant floor, or perhaps something brushing against a rough surface. I froze, head cocked, listening. Nothing. I dismissed it, of course. Old houses make noises. But then, a distinct creak from upstairs, not a floorboard underfoot, but a slow, deliberate strain, as if a heavy weight had just shifted. My gaze shot to the ceiling. The sound didn't repeat. My skin prickled. I walked to the kitchen, a space choked with cobwebs and the ghost of forgotten meals. It wasn't a trick of the light. The room was too dim for such a sharp, sudden movement. It was gone before I could properly turn my head. Unease began to coil in my gut. I told myself it was the isolation, the sheer size of the place, the lingering grief from my own past. Anything but what my instincts were screaming. I made a simple dinner of canned soup, the clatter of the spoon against the ceramic bowl sounding offensively loud in the quiet. It wasn't language, not exactly, but a low, sibilant hum that seemed to vibrate in the very air around me. It was like trying to hear a secret through a thick wall, tantalizingly close, yet utterly indecipherable. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, not by eyes, but by the house itself. It felt alive, a vast, silent organism. Elara's letters, sparse as they were, had often mentioned her garden, her children. I hadn't truly understood what she meant beyond her botanical passion. Sleep was a distant, unwelcome thought. I needed to explore, to understand what I was dealing with. My great-aunt's obsession with plants was evident even in the main house. Dried vines clung to banisters and faded botanical prints adorned the walls. I grabbed a powerful flashlight from my car and began a systematic search. I passed through a library filled with crumbling, leather-bound volumes on botany and mycology. Then a dusty drawing room until I found it. A heavy, ornate door at the very back of the manor, almost hidden behind a tapestry depicting a tangled, impossible forest. It didn't look like the other doors in the house. The air that wafted out was thick, humid, and carried an intense, earthy perfume, overlaid with that same sickly sweet scent I'd noticed earlier, only far more potent now. It was the smell of rampant, untamed life, but also of decay. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom, revealing a long, narrow passageway. They pulsed faintly, almost imperceptibly, in the beam of my light. At the end of the corridor, a colossal archway, choked with more of the fibrous growth, opened into what could only be Elara's conservatory. It was immense. A cathedral of glass and steel, but the glass was mostly obscured by the unchecked growth of plants, both familiar and utterly alien. Vines thick as my arm snaked across the high ceiling, their leaves a deep, bruised purple. Some of them bore strange, bulbous fruits that glistened wetly in the beam. The air was a suffocating blanket of heat and moisture, a jungle within the old house. This wasn't just a garden. This was a living, breathing entity. As I stepped inside, a faint click echoed from somewhere deeper within the verdant labyrinth, followed by a soft, wet squelch. Then a collective exhalation, a slow, deep sigh that seemed to come from the very structure of the conservatory itself. I couldn't make out words, but the sound of voices was undeniable. A chorus of faint, rustling secrets. This wasn't just Elara's peculiar hobby. This was her life's work, a hidden world nurtured by her solitude. And it was far from dormant. It felt sentient. And I, Blake, was now standing at its heart. The hair on my arm stood on end. The house wasn't just making noises. It was alive. And it was watching me. Blackwood Manor. It wasn't just a house. It was a maw, an ancient, gnarled mouth gaping at the sky, framed by skeletal trees that clawed at the perpetually overcast heavens. The stone facade, dark with lichen and age, seemed to absorb the meager daylight, leaving the grand entryway in perpetual shadow. I pulled my duffel from the trunk, the sound of the latch echoing too loudly in the sudden, profound quiet. The heavy oak door, when I finally managed to heave it open, groaned like a dying beast. The main rooms were draped in white sheets, ghostly figures standing sentinel over forgotten furniture, their outlines suggesting grand, heavy pieces I couldn't yet discern. But then I saw it. A splash of improbable green at the far end of the house. A faint, humid glow emanating from what had to be the conservatory. It was a beacon, a single point of vibrant life in a landscape of decay. An inexplicable pull, a magnetic force drew me towards it. Elara's domain, her life's work. It was a jungle, a sprawling, tangled wilderness under glass. Vines as thick as my arm snaked across the ceiling, their tendrils dripping with condensation. Broad, waxy leaves, some veined with startling purple, others edged with jagged, almost predatory teeth, reached out like grasping hands. Strange, bulbous growths clung to the stone walls, weeping viscous droplets that glistened in the humid light. I'd never seen plants like these, not in any botanical garden, not in any textbook. They felt alien, vibrant with a life force that bordered on aggressive. Deep within this verdant labyrinth, tucked away behind a curtain of drooping, velvety leaves, I found a small, circular clearing. A rickety wooden table stood there, piled high with botanical sketches, dried specimens pressed between sheets of paper, and a collection of leather-bound journals. A single, tarnished brass lamp sat beside them, its wick still smelling faintly of old oil. This was her sanctuary, her command center amidst the green chaos. My great-aunt, the recluse, the botanist. It felt cool, smooth, like old skin. And for a moment, I could almost feel her presence. I settled onto a wobbly stool, the humid air clinging to my skin, and opened the first journal. Elara's handwriting, once elegant and precise, grew increasingly frantic in later entries. The initial notes detailed meticulous observations of plant growth, soil composition, light exposure. Then the tone shifted. Words like symbiosis and integration began to appear, followed by increasingly disturbing phrases. She wrote about the root, always capitalized, always with an unsettling reverence, and its network, its consciousness. My breath hitched. This wasn't about gardening anymore. I turned a page, my fingers trembling slightly. "The growth demands," one entry scrawled, the ink smudged as if written in haste. "It feeds on memory, on sorrow." The conservatory in that moment felt less like a sanctuary and more like a cage, a verdant trap. I was trapped, not by physical bars, but by the burgeoning horror blooming on the pages before me, and by the living, breathing entity that seemed to pulse from the heart of this impossible garden. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. Elara wasn't just a botanist. He was a keeper, a nurturer of something monstrous. What had she been doing here all those years, surrounded by these grotesque, beautiful things? And what did she mean by the host? It seemed to sway, almost imperceptibly, as if listening. The manor wasn't just old, it was alive, and these plants, Elara's growth, were its tendrils, its nerves, its hungry mouth. And I, Blake, had just walked right into its embrace. Blackwood Manor. It wasn't just big. It was a hulking, moss-choked leviathan, hunched against a sky-bruised purple with approaching evening. I killed the engine, and the silence that descended was absolute, pressing in on my ears until they ached. I grabbed my duffel bag and the box of Elara's old journals I'd found tucked away in the back seat, stepping out onto the damp earth. I'd spent the first hour just trying to get a few lights working, battling rusted switches and blown fuses. It began subtly. A floorboard creaked in the empty hall outside my room, a sound too deliberate to be merely the house settling. I paused, listening, but heard nothing more than the low groan of the wind around the eaves. Later, as I was unpacking a box of books, a framed photograph on the mantelpiece, a faded image of a stern-faced Elara standing among her exotic plants seemed to tilt. Just a fraction, but enough to catch my eye. I straightened it, my fingers lingering on the cold glass. My reflection stared back, tired and wary. For a split second, the glass seemed to ripple, and the Elara in the photograph behind me appeared to be smiling, a wide, unsettling grin that wasn't there a moment later. I blinked, and it was gone. Just the usual somber expression. My imagination, I told myself, just the play of the firelight. But the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each passing minute. A profound, inescapable sense of being watched. Not by a person, but by the house itself. The very air felt thick, heavy with an unseen presence. It wasn't just the quiet anymore. It was the weight of the quiet. The feeling that something was listening, waiting. I pulled out my phone, needing to ground myself to hear a familiar voice. No signal. I walked to the window, craning my neck, hoping to catch a stray bar. Nothing. I tried the landline phone I'd seen in the downstairs study, its rotary dial a relic from another era. Dead. It sputtered, coughed, then went silent. I wasn't just isolated, I was cut off, deliberately. The thought settled in my gut like a stone. This wasn't just a dilapidated old house. It was something alive. Something that didn't want me to leave or to connect. My determination, which had been my anchor, began to fray. I must have drifted off in the armchair by the dying fire, because one moment I was staring into the embers, and the next, I was somewhere else entirely. The air was heavy with the metallic tang of old iron and the faint, sweet smell of decay. The benches were rough-hewn, the altar a simple, unadorned stone slab. I wasn't alone. Figures sat on the benches, hunched and still. They weren't moving, weren't breathing. Their skin was pale, almost translucent, and from their mouths, from their eyes, from every crevice in their still forms, tendrils of something green and slender, like nascent vines, slowly unfurled. They pulsed with a faint, sickly luminescence. One of the figures, seated in the very front pew, turned its head with a slow, grinding motion. Its face was skeletal, consumed, but I recognized the outline of its features. Elara. Her mouth opened, a silent scream, but no sound came out, only a soft, wet rustling as the vines writhed within. This wasn't just a dream. It was a revelation, a horrifying glimpse behind the veil. Elara hadn't just died. He had been consumed, transformed. The tendrils stretched faster now toward me, towards my chest, their tips glowing with an inviting, insidious warmth. I gasped, shooting upright in the armchair, my heart hammering against my ribs. The fire was out. The room plunged into an inky blackness. The air was thick with the cloying scent of that strange, sweet flora now overwhelming. My skin crawled, a phantom sensation of vines brushing against me. The house had closed in. The air in my lungs felt thick, like inhaling damp soil. I thrashed, trying to claw my way out of the dream, but it held me fast. I was in the manor, yes, but the walls were no longer stone and plaster. They were living, breathing masses of fibrous tendrils, pulsating with a slow, rhythmic throb that vibrated through my bones. The windows, usually a dark mirror reflecting the night, were now clouded with a translucent organic film, like the inside of an eye. And the plants, Elara's peculiar flora, they weren't just in the conservatory anymore. They were everywhere. Root systems snaked across the floorboards, pushing up through the cracks, their leaves unfurling in the dim, phosphorescent glow that permeated the entire structure. They reached for me, not quickly, but with a deliberate, languid stretch, like a predator confident in its prey. I could hear them, a low, guttural hum that vibrated in my teeth, a sound that wasn't sound but a feeling of intense, silent hunger. I gasped, sitting bolt upright in bed, the sheets tangled around my legs like restraining vines. The room was dark, the only light the faint silver glow of the moon filtering through the heavy curtains. My skin prickled with phantom touches, the lingering sensation of unseen tendrils brushing my face. It was just a dream, I told myself, a particularly vivid one. The isolation, the strangeness of this place, it was getting to me. But the feeling didn't dissipate. A low hum, just at the edge of my hearing, seemed to resonate from the very foundations of the house. I strained, listening. It wasn't the wind, nor the groan of old timbers. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, the cold floorboards a small comfort against the heat of my skin. My eyes darted around the room. I blinked, rubbing my eyes, trying to clear the haze. Had the wallpaper always had that faint vascular pattern? Or was it just my mind playing tricks? I needed to move, to break the spell. I stumbled out of the room, down the winding staircase, the floorboards creaking under my bare feet. Each sound was amplified, echoing through the silent house like a drumbeat. My destination was unclear at first, but a growing pull, a subtle, insistent tug guided me. It led me, inevitably, towards the conservatory. The glass panes of the conservatory door were fogged, not with condensation, but with a faint, greenish luminescence that pulsed gently. The plants inside seemed more vibrant, more alive than I remembered. Their leaves, in shades of deep emerald to almost black, unfurled with an alien grace. Tendrils, thicker than my wrist, snaked across the floor, some even climbing the glass walls, their tips adhering with a viscous, almost glistening substance. I walked deeper into the botanical labyrinth, the air growing heavier, the strange scent more potent. As I navigated a particularly dense cluster of towering fern-like structures, a faint glow caught my eye. It wasn't the general luminescence of the room, but a concentrated point of light, pulsing with a soft azure hue, tucked away in the crook of a gnarled, root-like branch. I reached out, my fingers trembling slightly. It was a spore, no bigger than my thumbnail, perfectly spherical, its surface smooth and slightly damp. It shimmered, casting tiny dancing motes of blue light onto the surrounding foliage. As my fingertips brushed against it, a jolt, not of electricity, but of something far more profound, shot through me. It was a sensation of deep, ancient connection, a feeling of belonging that was both comforting and utterly terrifying. My hand hovered, unable to retreat. A strange compulsion seized me, an undeniable urge to bring the spore closer, to inhale its faint, earthy perfume, to absorb its light. My mind screamed at me to stop, to recoil, to run from this unnatural attraction. This was wrong. This was the house, Elara's legacy, twisting something inside me. But the compulsion was like a powerful current, dragging me deeper into its depths. My surroundings blurred. The alien glow of the spore flickered, then vanished. I was no longer in the manor. The walls around me were rough-hewn stone, impossibly high, leading to a vaulted ceiling that disappeared into the gloom. I could feel the presence of empty pews, the faint scent of old wood and dust. The words materialized in my mind, unbidden, terrifyingly clear. This wasn't a memory. It was a sudden, jarring shift in reality, a terrifying projection of my deepest fears of entrapment. And then, slowly, insidiously, a faint green luminescence began to bloom at the base of the stone pillars. Tendrils of the manor's strange flora pushing through the ancient mortar, reaching, always reaching, even into this bleak, desolate place. My breath caught. The chapel dissolved, and I was back in the humid embrace of the conservatory, my hand still hovering over the bioluminescent spore. Was I losing my mind? Was this the house's doing, or my own unraveling sanity? The spore pulsed again, a silent invitation. The compulsion intensified, a burning ache behind my eyes, a frantic urge in my fingertips. My rational mind, or what was left of it, screamed a warning, but the desire to touch, to know, to simply feel that ancient connection again, was overwhelming. My hand descended, slowly, inexorably, towards the glowing sphere. I bolted upright in bed, a strangled gasp tearing from my throat. The sheets were tangled around my legs, slick with cold sweat. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum against the silence of the room. It took a long, disorienting moment for the solid, familiar lines of the bedroom to reassert themselves. The heavy oak wardrobe, the ornate fireplace, the dust motes dancing in the sliver of moonlight piercing the window. It wasn't the fibrous, pulsing horror of the dream, or so I desperately tried to convince myself. The way the tendrils had seemed to reach for me, the subtle, deep hum that resonated not just in my ears, but in my very bones. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, the cold floorboards a welcome shock against my bare feet. Sleep wasn't happening again tonight. Not with that image seared into my mind. I needed answers, and I knew exactly where to find them. Elara's journals, stacked haphazardly on the study desk, beckoned like forbidden fruit. In the study, the lamp cast pools of amber light, illuminating the stacks of leather-bound books. I picked up the latest journal I'd found, the one with the brittle browning pages and Elara's increasingly frantic script. My fingers traced the faded ink, a morbid curiosity overriding the gnawing fear. Her early entries were meticulous, scientific, detailed sketches of plant structures, careful notes on soil composition, light exposure. Then, a subtle shift. Day 147. The blackwood ivy responds to my touch. A slight tremor in the leaves, a turning towards my hand. Perhaps a sensitivity I had not previously noted. I scoffed quietly, a nervous habit. Sensitivity, sure. Plants respond to stimuli. It's basic biology. But as I read on, The entries grew less scientific, more personal. Day 212, it listens. I spoke of my grief, my isolation, and the tendrils around the west wing began to writhe gently, like a sympathetic gesture. It understands. Sympathetic gesture? No, this was where the sanity began to fray. Day 305, the hunger. It is growing, palpable. It demands sustenance beyond mere water and sun. A reciprocity. I give, it grows. I give, it thrives. It has shown me what it requires. The earth itself is not enough. What did she mean? What it requires? Day 389. Not sounds exactly, but a deep, resonant knowing. It speaks of roots, of connection, of a vast, unseen network. And it speaks of renewal. A new host for the old growth. A new host. The room felt suddenly different. The light from the lamp seemed to dim, though I hadn't touched the switch. The wood grain of the desk seemed to stretch, ripple, the lines distorting. My gaze snapped up from the journal. The study walls, which moments ago were solid oak and plaster, now seemed to recede, stretching upwards, becoming rough, unyielding stone. The light was gone, replaced by a pervasive, suffocating gloom. I was no longer in the study. The air was heavy, stagnant, carrying the faint, unsettling smell of old sweat, disinfectant, and something subtly putrid, like forgotten damp linens. I reached out a hand, my fingers scraping against rough, damp masonry. How? How could I be here? My mind raced, trying to reconcile the impossible. Was I still dreaming? Was the manor doing this? Was this what Elara had experienced? A vivid, terrifying projection? I clutched the journal, its leather cover suddenly slick in my hand. The silence was absolute, yet it thrummed with an unseen presence, a weight that pressed down on my chest. I felt like I was being watched, not by a person, but by the very walls themselves. Not from the stone around me, but from the pages still clutched in my hand. Elara's scrawl, now seeming to pulse with a faint inner light. I forced my eyes back to the journal, desperate for an anchor in this impossible reality. The roots run deep, deeper than the earth. They seek nourishment. A sacrifice. I have given it. For the wisdom. For the growth. It is not merely botanical. It is consciousness. It is a hunger. Not merely botanical. Consciousness. Hunger. Elara hadn't just believed the plants communicated. She believed they were sentient, predatory, and he had fed them. What or who had she fed them? The realization struck me with the force of a physical blow. And now I was here, in its roots, in its prison. A low guttural growl seemed to emanate from the very stone around me, shaking the air, vibrating through my teeth. It wasn't a sound of an animal, but something deeper, more ancient, a sound of immense, slow-moving hunger. I was still clutching the journal, but the words no longer mattered. Elara wasn't just mad. He had been a willing participant, a high priestess to something ancient and insatiable. And now, with her gone, Blackwood Manor was looking for a new steward, a new source. And I knew, with a certainty that turned my blood to ice, that I was no longer just an inheritor of a house. I was an offering. The words were a cold, hard slap. Not merely botanical. Consciousness. Hunger. The chapel walls seemed to lean in, the shadows thickening, becoming almost corporeal. Elara hadn't just believed the things she wrote. She knew them. And that knowledge, that stark, terrifying understanding, was now mine. Sleep was an impossible luxury. Elara had written of a core, a heart of the matter that pulsed beneath the foundations. She'd mentioned a conduit, a way to reach it, hidden in plain sight, yet utterly obscure. My great-aunt, for all her reclusive eccentricities, had been meticulously organized. It was a small, almost insignificant detail, tucked into the margin of an entry detailing the feeding cycles of the entity. A crude sketch, barely legible, of a specific gargoyle on the manor's oldest exterior wall, and an arrow pointing down. Below it, a single word: descent. The first gray light of dawn found me stiff and aching, but with a new, grim resolve. I had to see it. I had to understand what Elara had been doing, what he had unleashed, or perhaps what he had only managed to contain for so long. The drive back to Blackwood Manor felt different in the early morning light. It wasn't just an old house anymore. It was a shell, a skin, draped over something else entirely. I went straight to the oldest part of the house, the crumbling stone wing that housed the library and Elara's private study. I found the gargoyle on the exterior, its stone face weathered and cracked, exactly as Elara had sketched. I traced the line of the arrow. It pointed directly beneath the foundations of the study. Inside, I moved shelves, pushed aside heavy, moth-eaten tapestries. My fingers found a seam, a faint line in the stone that shouldn't have been there. It was almost invisible, meticulously crafted. A gust of air, thick and earthy, billowed out. My stomach churned. I hesitated for only a second, then clicked on my phone's flashlight. The tunnel was claustrophobic, the walls damp and slick under my fingers as I braced myself. The air grew heavier with each step, the strange, sweet odor intensifying. The tunnel twisted, then opened abruptly into a vast, cavernous space. My flashlight beam danced across an impossible sight. This wasn't a basement. This was a living, breathing chamber. From the floor, from the ceiling, from every fissure in the ancient rock, an intricate, horrifying network of roots and fungal growths erupted. They weren't merely roots. They were thick, rope-like tendrils, some as wide as my arm, others as slender as veins, all interwoven into a pulsating tapestry that seemed to hold the very earth in its grasp. The roots were a deep Venus purple in places, a sickly pale green in others, glistening with a viscous moisture. Patches of fungi, some like enormous shelves, others like clustered, bulbous growths, clung to the tendrils, many emitting a faint phosphorescent glow that cast an eerie, shifting light over the grotesque landscape. A low, rhythmic thrum vibrated through the air, resonating in my chest, a sound like a distant, sluggish heart. It was accompanied by a wet, sucking sound, like something breathing. I stumbled back, pressing myself against the rough rock of the passage entrance. This was it. This was the core. Not merely a root system, but an organism of unimaginable scale. It filled the cavern, a monstrous, silent engine driving the manor above. The walls themselves seemed to be consumed, integrated into its structure. I saw remnants of brick, stone, even splintered wood, all encased and absorbed by the relentlessly growing tendrils. A particularly thick cluster of roots directly in front of me, covered in glowing, bell-shaped fungi, seemed to pulse with a slightly different rhythm. It moved with an agonizing slowness, extending towards me, its tip probing the humid air. It wasn't just growing, it was searching. The sickly sweet odor became overwhelming, filling my mouth with a metallic taste. I understood now. Elara hadn't been tending a garden. He had been feeding a monster. Its walls, its floors, its very foundation were merely extensions of this vast, hungry, subterranean heart. And I, standing there in the humid, glowing gloom, was just another new presence, another potential host. The first gray light of dawn had brought a semblance of clarity, but it was a fragile thing, easily shattered. The manor, it seemed, wasn't content to merely whisper its secrets. It wanted to scream them, directly into the soft tissue of my brain. I started in the library, the place where Elara's journals had first hinted at the monstrous truth. The old leather-bound tomes on the shelves appeared to ripple at their edges. their titles blurring into indecipherable scripts. I ran a hand over a spine, expecting the familiar dryness, but my fingers met a slick, cool film, like dew on a fungus cap. I snatched my hand back, a shiver chasing itself down my arm. My hunt for answers quickly devolved into a desperate attempt to distinguish reality from the manor's insidious projections. A shadow would stretch, impossibly long, from a sturdy oak table, then recede to nothing. Tendrils, fine as spider silk, crept along the skirting boards. Patches of velvety green like moss spread across the wallpaper, obscuring the faded floral patterns. The very air felt heavy, saturated with an unseen pollen that seemed to coat my tongue and lodge in my sinuses, dulling my senses, blurring my thoughts. I found myself back in the conservatory, drawn by an invisible current. It wasn't just growing, it was breathing. And as I watched, transfixed, the dense tangle of vines and leaves began to shift, to rearrange itself. Not subtly, but deliberately, forming shapes I almost recognized. It started with a face, indistinct at first, then sharper. A child's face, my child's face, wreathed in green, tendrils like tears streaming from its eyes. The memory, usually a dull ache, exploded into vivid, searing pain. I stumbled back, knocking over a terracotta pot. The crash barely registered over the roaring in my ears. The manor wasn't just showing me things. It was playing them, reenacting my most profound failures. I saw the car, twisted metal and shattered glass, not as a memory, but as a living tableau woven from the conservatory's foliage. I clutched my head, trying to force the images away, but they were too strong, too real. Then, without warning, the conservatory walls dissolved. High, barred windows cast slivers of moonlight onto rough, unadorned benches. It was a space of enforced quiet, of grim contemplation. My mind reeled. How had I gotten here? Where was the manor? My own breathing sounded impossibly loud. This wasn't a memory of my past, but it felt like the raw, unvarnished truth of my present. I was trapped, not by walls, but by the relentless assault on my perception. You belong here, Blake. It was something deeper, older, resonant with the very foundations of Blackwood Manor. It was the root, and it was speaking to me, not through sound, but through a direct current into my consciousness. The chapel walls began to ripple, just as the library books had. The gray stones seemed to soften, to blur, and then, slowly, tendrils of green began to push through the cracks, delicate at first, then bolder, thicker. The benches transformed into gnarled roots, reaching out, beckoning. The visions of my past tragedy, the car, the faces, began to merge with the encroaching vegetation. The guilt, the crushing weight of it began to soften, to diffuse, not into peace, but into a strange, unsettling acceptance. Join us, Blake. The voice pulsed, clearer now, almost a melody. Become part of the cycle, part of the growth, part of everything. A profound weariness settled over me, a bone-deep exhaustion that yearned for rest. The root wasn't just attacking me, it was offering me a place, an escape from the relentless grind of my own mind. It promised an end to the struggle, emerging with something vast and ancient. My limbs felt heavy, my thoughts sluggish, yet a strange warmth bloomed in my chest. To give in, to let go, to simply be. The idea was seductive, terrifyingly so. I was losing myself, not to madness, but to something far more insidious, a perverse, comforting embrace. The root had offered solace, an escape, a quiet surrender. But somewhere, deep beneath the weariness, a spark of defiance flickered. I wouldn't just lie down and become another branch in its sprawling, suffocating network. Elara had tried to control it, and it had consumed her. I wouldn't follow. My resolve hardened, a brittle shield against the creeping sense of belonging. The conservatory. That was the heart, the nerve center I could still reach. If I could sever enough of its roots, maybe I could break its hold on me, on the manor itself. I found a heavy-duty pruning saw in the utility room, its teeth glinting menacingly in the dim light filtering through the grimy windows. The handle felt rough, reassuringly solid in my grip. This was it. No more running, no more succumbing. The air in the conservatory was thick, humid, a cloying sweetness that made my stomach churn. The growths were everywhere now, a grotesque tapestry of swollen vines and bulbous forms, clinging to the glass, obscuring the sky. Some pulsed faintly, a slow, organic rhythm that echoed the thrumming in my own veins. I raised the saw, the metal cold against my clammy palm. My first target, a massive rope-like tendril, thicker than my arm, that snaked across the floor and disappeared into a fissure in the stone wall. I braced myself, then brought the saw down with all my might. The teeth bit deep, tearing through the fibrous flesh with a wet, tearing sound. The tendril thrashed, not with the violence of a living creature, but with a slow, deliberate retraction, like a muscle spasming. I kept sawing, my arms burning, sweat stinging my eyes. Each cut was an act of rebellion, a small victory against the overwhelming tide. The air grew heavier, pressing in on me. The light seemed to dim, swallowed by the encroaching foliage. From the corners of my vision, I saw other tendrils begin to writhe, extending, searching. A sharp, stinging pain erupted on my ankle. I cried out, stumbling back. A thin, barbed vine had lashed out, wrapping around my leg, its thorns digging deep. I hacked at it furiously with the saw, severing it, but the marks it left burned, a fiery protest. The conservatory was fighting back. The plants were no longer inert. They shifted, groaned, emitted low, guttural sounds that seemed to vibrate through the very floorboards. The sweet scent intensified, becoming sickly, almost suffocating. My vision wavered, the edges of the room blurring, losing definition. One moment, I was surrounded by the humid, verdant chaos of the conservatory. I blinked, my mind struggling to catch up. Where was I? The saw was still in my hand, but the thick tendrils I'd been fighting were gone. A raised platform at the far end held a simple wooden altar, and behind it, a tall, narrow window, black as pitch. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. I gripped the saw tighter, my knuckles white. The wood splintered with a dull thud, not the wet tear of plant matter. But as I struck, a jolt of pain shot through my arm, a sharp physical agony that had no place in an illusion. The silence was not empty, but heavy, charged with unseen presence. They spoke of helplessness, of inevitability, of the sweet release of surrender. I stumbled, my legs feeling like lead. It was like cobwebs, but alive, probing. They were the same roots I'd seen in the manor, the same tendrils I'd been fighting. This wasn't just an illusion. It was a projection, a mental trap, but the entity was still physically acting upon me. The pain in my ankle from the vine was real. The ache in my arm from striking the pew was real. I slashed at the encroaching roots with the saw, but they were too numerous, too fast. They wrapped around my ankles, my calves, pulling me down. Join us, Blake. Let go. It's so much easier. I fought, a desperate, flailing struggle against an unseen enemy in a phantom chapel. The saw clattered from my grasp as my hands were caught, bound by thick, resilient tendrils that had erupted from the floor. They weren't just roots. They were the pews, the altar, the very walls of the chapel, now pulsing with that same sickly green light. I fell hard, my head striking the stone floor with a sickening crack. A blinding flash of white, then an agonizing throb. I was trapped. And the manor, through its terrible illusion, had won. For now. The saw, my last desperate weapon, lay somewhere on the floor, swallowed by the encroaching biomass. I strained against the bonds, the thick strands pressing into my skin, surprisingly firm yet spongy. The darkness was absolute, a heavy blanket that pressed down on my eyes, and for a moment, panic threatened to overwhelm me. When I opened them again, a faint, sickly green luminescence pulsed nearby. It wasn't bright, more like the glow of decaying wood in a deep forest, just enough to etch the barest outlines of my surroundings into the gloom. I was indeed in a chapel-like space, but it was alive. The pews were gnarled, root-like growths, the altar a grotesque mound of interwoven plant matter, constantly shifting, subtly expanding. And there, resting on a pedestal that had once been the altar, now a glistening, damp surface of entwined tendrils, was Elara's final journal. How had it gotten there? Had it simply grown from the floor like everything else? I watched, mesmerized and horrified, as a slender, root-like appendage extended from the altar's base, gently nudging the journal open. The pages, ancient and brittle, unfurled with a soft, papery sigh. The green light intensified, focusing on a specific page, illuminating Elara's familiar, elegant script. I strained my neck, trying to read. The root. It is not a thing to be fought, but understood. A consciousness, vast and ancient, seeking only connection, growth. It has chosen this place, this manor, as its heart, and I, Elara, have been privileged to be its gardener, its steward. But the time for stewardship is past. It hungers for a deeper communion. My stomach twisted. Deeper communion? What did that even mean? The ritual is simple, yet profound. A surrender. A merging. To become one with the root. To offer one's essence, one's very being, as a conduit. To feed it, not with blood, but with the spark of life itself. To become a new root, a new conduit, a new gardener. It is a sacrifice, yes, but also an apotheosis. Apotheosis. Release. Elara wasn't just a victim. He had chosen this. She hadn't been consumed. He had merged. The thought was more horrifying than any monster I could have imagined. Her reclusiveness, her peculiar gardens, her obsession. It wasn't madness, not in the way I understood it. It was a terrifying, deliberate embrace of something alien and all-consuming. I could almost hear Elara's voice, calm and serene, explaining her horrifying choice. And then the realization hit me. A punch to the gut that stole my breath. This wasn't just her story. This was my story now. The manor wasn't just showing me what had happened. It was showing me what would happen. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of loam and decay pressing down on me. It wasn't asking. It was demanding. My mind raced, scrambling for an escape, a way out of this impossible equation. Succumb, become one, become a conduit, a new gardener. The thought made bile rise in my throat. Or resist, fight, and be consumed anyway. A broken vessel, a failed attempt at communion. The green light flickered, then brightened, bathing the chapel in an unholy glow that revealed more of its living architecture. The root was waiting. It had presented its terms through Elara's mad, serene words. My body was a cage, my mind a storm. Surrender or perish. Become part of its vast, unfeeling network, or be crushed by its indifference. The choice was clear, stark, and utterly unbearable. I wanted to scream, but no sound escaped my constricted throat. My eyes darted around the living chapel, searching for anything, any small crack in the overwhelming organic prison. There had to be. The air in the prison chapel after lights out was a singular thing. Cold, ancient, and utterly still. It tasted like limestone dust and the ghost of old prayers. I sat on a hard, unforgiving pew, the rough-hewn wood digging into my thighs, my back aching. My eyes, open in the absolute dark, saw nothing but the deeper blackness of the unseen altar. No moonbeams pierced the high, narrow windows. No streetlights bled through the stained glass. This wasn't Blackwood Manor. Not anymore. Or perhaps I had carried it with me. I pressed my palms against my temples, trying to remember how I got here. The last thing was the root. The pulsing, breathing mass in the cellar, its tendrils reaching, its fungal breath filling my lungs. Elara's words had echoed. Apotheosis, release. She hadn't been a victim. He had merged. And I had stood there, watching, feeling the inexorable pull, the deep primeval hunger that wasn't for consumption, but for union. I could still see it, not with my eyes, but with something deeper, something that now resided behind my vision. The intricate network of veins, the slow, rhythmic pulse of sap or blood or whatever unholy fluid coursed through its living architecture. And a low hum began, not in the chapel, but within my own skull. It vibrated against my teeth, a deep, resonant thrum that felt like the earth itself breathing. It was the same sound I'd heard in the manor, growing louder, more insistent, as I delved deeper into its secrets. It was the root, and it was here, with me. Or I was with it. My fingers, when I brought them before my face, felt alien. The skin, though I couldn't see it, felt tighter, coarser, like bark. A faint, almost imperceptible green sheen seemed to cling to them, a trick of the internal light that wasn't light at all. This chapel wasn't a physical place. It was a memory, a construct. The last bastion of me. The plink, plink, plink intensified, sounding less like water and more like something growing, expanding. I could feel the presence now, not just hear it. It was everywhere, seeping into the stones of the chapel, twisting the imagined ironwork of the windows into grotesque organic patterns. It was inside me, Elara's choice. She hadn't been defeated. He had been welcomed. The root didn't destroy, it absorbed. It didn't kill, it assimilated. And I, in my foolish quest for answers, for a fresh start, had walked right into its embrace. My determination, which had driven me through the manor's decaying halls, now felt like a desperate, futile thrashing against an ocean. I was a tiny boat, caught in an unstoppable current. I felt a pressure building behind my eyes, as if 1,000 new senses were trying to bloom within my skull. Images flashed, not mine, but fragments of others. Before that, other memories, older, dimmer, of previous caretakers, their faces blurred by time, their consciousnesses dissolving into the collective. This was apotheosis, not just for Elara, but for all of them. And now, for me. The chapel walls began to ripple, the stones softening, stretching. Tendrils, impossibly fine and strong, started to sprout from the floor, winding around my ankles, then my calves. They weren't binding me, they were connecting me. Each new point of contact sent a jolt, not of pain, but of recognition, of belonging. I wasn't escaping. I wasn't physically free. This wasn't a prison in the conventional sense. This was a process, the final phase. My own thoughts, once clear and distinct, began to fray at the edges, mingling with the vast ancient consciousness that now enveloped me. I felt the manor, not as an external place, but as an extension of myself. I felt the damp earth beneath its foundations, the slow, patient growth of the roots, the unseen tendrils reaching ever further into the surrounding forest. I felt the rain on its roof, the wind through its skeletal trees, the deep, subterranean pulse of the entity. Blake, I tried to think, holding on to the name, the last thread of my individual self. Blake. It was being subsumed, diluted by the overwhelming presence of the root. The tendrils reached my chest, wrapping around my torso, not crushing, but integrating. I saw, felt, and was the manor. I was the hunger that waited, deep beneath the earth, for the next inheritor, the next consciousness to join the ever-growing tapestry. The plink, plink, plink faded, replaced by the deep, steady thrum of the root, now no longer an external sound, but the rhythm of my own being. It was full of countless lives, countless memories, all woven into the enduring horror of Blackwood Manor. And I was one of them. The manor breathed, and I breathed with it. And I waited.